Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is the Talamanca Review. It is Sunday, September 7th. It is 7:55 p.m. And I think I'm going to close out Annihilation because a lot of the rest of the report prepared for me is really about whether the events are literal or a form of literary exposition or parables in a way, but I don't think that they are. I think the evidence of the Hebrew influence on Western politics that is visible in the last alleged 500 years of history is certainly suggestive to me that there is absolutely nothing allegorical about what they're saying in the Bible. And further to that, the present day utterances of Israeli-based rabbis would suggest the same thing, that the Jewish desire for, I don't know what you'd call it, destruction of people based on what they perceive to be the edicts of the mandates, the orders of their God, who they allege to be in a covenant with, persist to today in the scriptures. So the interpretation of the scriptures, one second, the dog is scratching at the door. Buddy, wanna say hello to everybody? Get up on the sofa there, don't go under the table. Oh, my guy, he can't, he's like with me all the time, man. I don't know what to say about this guy. He's just, what are you going to do? He loves me, I love him. Why should we be apart? So, I'm going to move away from that topic tonight. I'm not going to do an annihilation redo. I'm just going to talk about life and I think how to cope and move forward and to continue to be creative and loving and productive. And I don't mean productive in the capitalist sense, you know that, right? I mean productive in the sense of growing into your life and your being. How to maintain all of those things in calamitous times. I was watching a little bit of Robert Phoenix tonight. I just noticed on my YouTube feed that he was live, and quite a number of people who I talk to off air who are listeners of the Talamanca Review listen to Robert Phoenix, and I find him to be really insightful and human and souled and interesting to listen to. But the guest he had on tonight was kind of leaning towards this, what is real idea, thus fulfilling the mandate of William Casey, who I think in 1980 or 1982 was recorded to have said, when everything that the American people believe is false, we will know that our mission is complete, or something to that effect. It's an accurate paraphrasing, if not a literal quotation. And you have to ask yourself why a people would want to do this. Why a people, an intelligence agency, would want to create complete confusion and misapprehension in their people. And it's a very interesting question to ask yourself. And I don't have an answer for that. I think I go back to my old idea of evil. There's a lot of things that people do that are very bad, but I don't consider them evil, right? If you get yourself hooked on an addictive drug and you have to turn to pickpocketing people or breaking into their homes to steal things to sell to feed your habit, I don't necessarily consider that evil. I consider it unfortunate and stupid. It didn't need to happen. I consider the addict responsible for their actions because they allowed the addiction to happen. I don't consider it evil. I don't necessarily consider the pursuit of power to be evil. You know, there's many situations in pre-modern times where positions of leadership in various civilizations were determined through competition that often led to severe injury or death. You know, ascension in the ranks by combat. And this is a similar feature we see in various groups of mammals like wolves, who define an alpha male and an alpha female. Now, once those roles are defined, the alphas are completely subservient to the pack. They protect the pack. It's not just an abuse of power, but attaining the rank of alpha is done by combat. It's the same thing with a large group of dogs. Talk to anybody who runs a pound, and if there's a general yard they let all the dogs out into in the afternoon to run around and socialize for a couple hours, there will be a leader in the yard like a prison, and that will be the alpha, that will be the pack leader. And occasionally they'll be challenged, but most of the time not. So I don't consider those things evil. I consider them part of our animalistic nature. And we are animals, right? You know, I never let myself forget that, you know, a human being is certainly a different kind of mammal on the planet, but still a mammal. We're an animal. We have animal instincts and animal needs. And if you've lost touch with those instincts and those animal senses, come on down here and spend 3 days with me. We'll go in the jungle. They'll awaken immediately. You become a different person walking through the jungle. So I don't consider those things evil. The conclusion I'm coming toward more and more, and it runs contrary to all of this stuff coming out of various sources, you know, the usual suspects, if you will, Gaia, various alternative media voices, things like this. I think I'm not convinced there's some galactic federation or council that wants to help the human race. All right? If they wanted to help the human race, they'd come in here. Well, let me put it to you this way, and this is going to require a little threading of the needle with language, okay? Because I'm going to be using words very specifically. There's no compassion for us. Okay? And remember, when I start to talk about this UFO world, remember, you're not talking to somebody who doesn't believe it's real. I've had my own experiences, multiple experiences. I've had at least one race I'm conscious of reach out to communicate with me in 2000, and again in, I think, early 2025 this year. They came back again. They usually come in meditation when I create what I would call a sacred space, not non-thinking but not sleeping. And they'll just pop in. And there's no verbal communication. There's a tremendous amount of telepathic communication. But it's all real, is what I'm saying. The whole extraterrestrial phenomenon is real. Okay? But this idea that there's a galactic council that, oh my God, now he's scratching the door to leave. It's like I'm his concierge. Okay, buddy. There you go. Don't come back. I find it very difficult, to believe these things, and I'll tell you why. And to do so, I'm going to have to get a definition first. Okay, so let's look up the definition of compassion. Now, I've noticed, because I've been a regular dictionary reader since my early 20s, which is almost 40 years, right? Because I'm 59 now. And what I'm noticing is that a lot of the words are changing. They're changing the language right under our feet. And language is important, folks. Okay? It's important. The language we've been using is derived from Latin and Greek. Okay? And the words had rich and deep meanings coming from the Greek philosophy, Roman civil law, and the Roman spiritual culture, because I don't believe the Romans were a culture without spirit. If they were, they never would have been able to produce Marcus Aurelius. And if you haven't read the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, I highly recommend that you do. So the Oxford Languages says that it's a noun, and it's sympathetic pity and concern for the sufferings or misfortunes of others. Okay? Aha. Okay, but they've changed the definition. The definition used to be much more rooted in the Latin. In this case, they give the etymology, the origin of the word. So compati is is Latin. So compati is the first part. Compati literally means in Latin to suffer with, to share the suffering, to suffer with somebody. Right? An example would be the fellow who helped Christ carry the cross until the Romans got to whatever the name of that horrible mount where Christ was crucified. In the story. I'm not saying I advocate that or that actually happened. I'm not saying it didn't either. I just want to avoid the debate, and I don't want to alienate anybody listening to the Talamanca Review simply by giving an example of compassion, which is why I'm citing this. It came to mind, this instance in the Bible. So that fellow carried the cross for Christ for a part of the distance to, I think it's Golgotha. And so he shared Christ's suffering. Literally, the weight of that cross was on his back. He carried it. Okay? So this is what compassion is. Yeah, and it's interesting that they gave the etymology here, because had they not, I was going to say it means to suffer with, to share the suffering of somebody. And they used to say that in the dictionary. They used to say the definition of compassion is to share the suffering, or to suffer with somebody. Now it's sympathetic pity and concern for the sufferings or misfortunes of others, so they've turned compassion into virtue signaling. You see how that works? You see how this ideology is spreading like a virus? Okay? I'm deeply concerned about you. I'm going to paint my hair green and go to a protest at City Hall. That's how much I care. But they don't share the suffering. Okay? I have compassion for my family, and I have compassion for the people living in my pueblo, because I share their suffering. I share the suffering of my brother-in-law when he can't meet his nut. I share the suffering of many of the congregants that go to my wife's church. One of them was robbed a couple years ago, and they took her cell phone. We knew who it was, but he was kind of gang connected, so you can't really do anything unless his buddies are going to come up with their 9mm, right? So what I did was I went and got my wife's friend and my friend, her name is Italy, Idali. I went and got her a new phone. I spent like $400 on a new phone. I didn't have a lot of money, but I shared her suffering and I gave it to her and I said, look, man, the Pueblo loves you. Don't ever forget that. And the guy that stole it left the mountain. I guess me buying a phone and that act of compassion in his paranoid, drug-addled mind might have been interpreted as this guy's gonna kill me. A lot of people are a little bit afraid of me over here, and it's not because I'm a tough guy, or I know how to fight with a machete or anything like that, or I've got a bunch of guns tucked around my house. It's because I have a little bit of money. And money is everything over here, right? To have somebody beaten to a pulp and landed in the hospital for a month would cost me about 200 Canadian or 200 US, right? Oh my God. Talk about like touching the butterfly wings here. Okay, you vas a hablar a ella.
Ya no, yo sé quién era Luis, preguntar.
You vas a hablar a ella. ¿Qué?
Preguntar por tú si bien.
Okay. Well, that turned into something. Just trying to podcast here. Got earplugs in. I can't hear what my wife is saying. Okay, buddy. Holy cow. Make up your mind. You're either here with me or you're outside. I've completely lost where I was. It was just a wonderful flow, stream of consciousness podcast. Oh, I love this guy, though. I can't really get upset with him. Yeah, so it's because I have a little bit of money. And money, people are afraid, like if he gets pissed off, he's going to hire some people to kill you. I mean, I would never do something like that, but if you have a little bit of money, people are a little bit afraid of you over here. Like they'll only go so far, right? So he left the mountain because he took me buying the cell phone as a bad omen for him. So that's compassion, to suffer with people, right? When somebody like bad in the family, like my nephew Joseph, gets gunned down, I don't share the suffering. I'm very stoic in these instances. I said to my wife, I'll go to the funeral with you. I'll be polite and everything and respectful. I won't say anything stupid, but his death was not a huge loss for me, and I think he deserved to die, right? I mean, the kid was like 23 or 24. He'd killed 12 people already. It was a bona fide menace to society. And so I didn't share that suffering. But most of the suffering on this mountain I share. So that's real compassion. Now let's circle back, because I do these rabbit holes and sometimes they go too deep. The footnote's longer than the page sometimes when I'm podcasting. So they don't have compassion for us, this Galactic Federation. I am so sick of these fucking channelers and all these bullshit artists. Okay? Oh, they can't interfere. They don't want to get karmically entangled. Well, karmic entanglement is the very definition of compassion. Okay? And I think in many ways this is one of the great failures of the Eastern religions. I spend a good amount of time hacking apart the Western system, and I don't spend that much time talking about the Eastern system is not really a religion per se. The Eastern systems are spiritual paths where they're full-time. It's like a job or going off to university. You join an ashram or a spiritual community, and you practice these spiritual arts all day. And so that's a complete separation from society. They say the world is what the world is, but I need to go out into the world, and I need to go out of the world, and I need to spiritually grow. So the idea of them not having compassion is not really valid. Now, the religion most defined by compassion is undoubtedly Christianity. But it's not real compassion anymore. It has degenerated to virtue signaling and social pretense and gated communities and sequestering yourself from people and stuff like that. Right? So, I think one of the best examples of compassion I've ever seen in my life was when John F. Kennedy created the Peace Corps. Because rather than throw money at corrupt dictators in third world countries to try and put in water systems, dig wells, or all of this kind of stuff, he would send these bright-eyed, optimistic young Americans who wanted to be of service to foreign countries. And they would go into that community and they would try to help. It was very beautiful, actually. And that's an example of compassion, because the Peace Corps officer would become embroiled in the affairs of the community that he was put into or she was put into. And oftentimes they would be poor, remote communities. I met a Peace Corps worker here when I was on my first long visit before I moved here. I lived here as a trial run for 6 months in 2012. And I met a Peace Corps worker. She was focusing on diminishing prostitution in Costa Rica and various other female-centric things. But she got her hands dirty, man. She just got right in and became a part of it. So where am I going with all of this? Well, we're talking about the future. We're talking about, the world to come and everything, and all of these UFOs and extraterrestrials. But if they don't have compassion for us, if they're not willing to suffer with us, they can't really help us. They can maybe at best internally communicate with highly developed people, which they do. But I've met a lot of these people who are in open, sustained contact with extraterrestrials. If Barbara Marciniak is probably the best known Palladian contactee. I think she wrote a famous book called Bringers of the Dawn. But she didn't change anything. And I find all the people working with Palladians, they come out with these data dumps like channelers. And there's nothing tangible or essential or substantial or spiritual about it. It's a bunch of navel-gazing information. That's fascinating. The Nordics, I've known several people who are in open contact with the Nordics. And you want to know what the Nordic vibration is? The Nordic vibration is like European death metal. It's like Vikings on crystal meth. It's a very intense vibration. Anyone you ever meet who's had contact or is in contact with the Nordics will have this very intense, almost military disposition about them. And I don't think they've helped the human race that much. A lot of these extraterrestrial races just abuse us too, or just take more than they give. Now, because they're operating at least one dimension above us in terms of fusing reality between 3D and 4D, they're extremely beneficial. And there is some truth to this prime directive idea from Star Trek that there's only so far you can go in tinkering with the evolution of a people, that we have to do it ourselves. And that's why this thing we're going through now And it looks like we're leading towards World War III. All the signs are there. Okay, I'd say they're going to have it going by end of September. And a little bird told me, but I took it in a couple weeks ago. I didn't make much of it. He sent me a text message on Microsoft Teams. A friend of mine, well-known podcaster, I won't name him. And he was told by a quote-unquote insider, what Cliff High might call a rabbi. And this rabbi felt a sense of indebtedness to my source because the specific work and research my source does had aided this gentleman in profiting in the markets. And so apparently it's all going to, according to this fellow, it's all going to kick off around October 1st. But I don't like to give dates or anything like that because you never know. And because larger forces can come in and change things. But all the signs are there, the First and Second World Wars were started by Western European powers attacking or occupying a Slavic country. And so World War I was Serbia. And World War II, I think that when it really got off was when the Germans went into Poland. So the conditions of life and the conditions of spiritual responsibility do not change one iota in war. You still have an obligation to be happy. You still have an obligation to seek love and represent love and being love. One moment, please. Oh, it's just my wife pocket dialing there. Boy, between the wife and the dog, it's hard to get a podcast off tonight. So the conditions of living through war remain the same. Nothing really changes, right? So you got to go through it and you got to be the same person. And war and calamity are a great time to have an evolved consciousness. Because you're going to have much less fear. And you're going to have just much more grace about you no matter what happens. The time you're born, the day you're born and the day you die are written. Okay? They're written before you're born. Okay? So the life has a fixed time. So if you die in the war, you were meant to die in the war. And when you come to spiritual maturity, you come to realize that a death is a gift. Now, I don't mean to. Don't take that to mean I'm suicidal or anything like that. Nothing could be further from the truth. It's just that life out of the body, if the life you lived in the body was good, your life out of the body is going to be. It means the mission and what you came into that life to do is finished. So it's a good thing. Literally, the most important thing is to live well. And to live well is to live in pursuit of your supreme being. And that's not another. That's you. I mean, we're all in it. We're all one being. God is the unified being of all life. All life. Okay, so everything is everything. Sounds like a line in an Eminem song. But it's true. Everything is everything. And hatred and anger and bitterness and resentment, these things will prevent you from being. Okay, they will prevent you from being. And being is the most important thing that you can do in your life. And being is joyful. Being is in the moment. Being is God. Okay, so the supreme being is the supreme state of existing in a moment. Again, now normally when you hear that language, supreme being, you think of some dude up in the clouds with a big white beard. But it's not what it is. People don't interpret the language correctly, and the theologians don't help that much either. And that's done intentionally. Nobody's going to help you but yourself. Well, there are people who will help you. There's many, many teachers and gurus out there who will help you. But I counsel against lifetime commitment to any one teaching or any one teacher. Okay? Because it gets stale. And if you're really going to do it, you're going to do it. But various teachers can teach you various important things. It might not be a bad idea to study Kriya Yoga, learn how to breathe in the Kriya, and have contact with an accomplished practitioner or an enlightened practitioner of Kriya Yoga as you go through it. Not a bad idea at all. It would be an excellent idea to have the counsel of an advanced NAD Yoga practitioner, a sound-based practitioner. NAD Yoga is the yoga of sound and using sound to achieve enlightenment. Not a bad idea at all. These are systems and paths. But once you learn the techniques and you know how to do them properly, everything depends on you. Everything depends on you. How much you're going to put into it, how committed to it are you going to stay throughout the day, so on and so forth. And everything in the world now is incentivized against that. Now, let's circle back to the beginning of the podcast, because this has been nothing but a series of long footnotes. What is real evil? If war is not evil, if seeking power is not evil, is robbing someone because your children are hungry not evil, or you're a drug addict and you can't help yourself not evil? What is evil? Well, this is something I'm going to repeat again and again and again and again on the Talamanca Review, because you got to understand what evil is. Because if you don't understand what evil is, you're not going to make much progress in this life in any way, shape, or form. Okay? Evil is the deliberate suppression of what human beings are. The deliberate suppression of our growth into a light-filled species. Now, circling back to the Galactic Federation and all the extraterrestrials, you want to know what I think? Here's what I think. I think they're afraid of us. I think that we are a very special creation, unlike any other race on the planet, in the universe. I think human beings, and specifically this planet, is special. And we've been given something that these other races aren't given. Now, we're not given their intellect. We're not given their longevity. Some of these races live thousands of years. They're not necessarily in a physical state all the time. A lot of these races, what they're doing, and this will explain space travel to you as well, a lot of these races can phase out of the third dimension, exactly like the gray aliens popping into John Edmonds' reality at Stardust Ranch, like they're pulling back a shower curtain. Where are they coming from? Well, they're coming from another dimension. And a lot of these races can exist in this other dimension, the fourth dimension. And that's a place where there would be tremendous rejuvenation, and they can project themselves physically into the third dimension. So this explains the consciousness phenomenon of extraterrestrials and the physical phenomenon of extraterrestrials. And remember that podcast that I did where Stephen Greer is talking about being in labs, and the scientists have created these toroidal fields and a little creature pops out and runs around the lab in full 3D. We can assume now that human beings have the technology to pull spirit forms or fourth dimensional forms into physical reality and physicalize them. This would be a true portal. Okay? Most portals are just fourth dimensional, meaning that if you walk through a portal, the vibe or feeling there will change. You'll feel something different. You know, I suppose this is why people go to places like Stonehenge and the pyramids and all of this sort of stuff, which I consider to be completely nonsensical and really the behavior of a moron. No offense if you've gone to Stonehenge or you've gone to the pyramids. But why do you need to go to a lesser portal when the greatest portal in your life is right with you all the time? It's your body is your portal. Your body is the launching ground to other dimensions. Why do you need to go to the pyramids? Why do you need to go to any sacred sites? You know, it's just human beings have this horrible tendency to denigrate and degenerate everything that they come into contact with, including spirituality. So when a religion is debased to holy sites, whether it be where that Jesus was born in Nazareth or Jerusalem, the holy city, or what is the city that has the Kaaba in Saudi Arabia? I think it's Riyadh, where the big black box there. There's no such thing as a holy site. Now, for the morons who don't understand anything and who are easily manipulated, there would be a tremendous feeling at these sites because there's portals there. There's massive number of portals at the Vatican as well. Talk to anybody who's ever walked around in St. Peter's Square. My son did when he was 16, and he described it to me, and I quote, like there's 1,000 invisible eyes on you all the time. And he's probably right, because the Vatican has been practicing portal magic for I don't know how long, right? We're also literalizing the concept of a portal now with CERN. That's what that's about. That's some Stargate stuff right there. Physically walk through a portal. That's what they're trying to do with CERN. Now, I don't have an opinion on it, whether it's good or evil or anything like that. I think human beings are a growing exploratory race, and we're gonna turn over every stone, right? And nothing we can do about it. I'm not sure this reality was meant to be cracked open, although I could be wrong. I think part of the new reality or the new world we're going to be going into is the human beings who go into that world are going to be living multidimensionally. Okay, and when you're living multidimensionally, you're going to be in contact with all forms of life from all over the universe and other places as well. Interdimensionals. There are beings in this universe who come from other universes to visit. It's an incredibly complex and social thing, the reality of sentient life and collectivities, and the human race is a collectivity. A series of micro-collectivities we call races, religions, ethnicities, regions, but really at the end of the day, we're one collectivity. And this has been one of the main reasons that they're promoting the extraterrestrial narrative so publicly, is they're trying to unify us for global culture. Okay, which I've said on my podcast, I'm not against. But I am certainly against an evil global control of this planet, run by people who give us the currency to trade and buy with, and they control that currency and live off of that trade to the standard of pharaohs, and are the principal practitioners of the evil I describe, which is the suppression of human growth. Okay? You think whatever, it kind of amazes me sometimes, when I look at the stuff that's out there and the stuff people are interested in. There's so much information and so many rabbit holes out there. There's all kinds of people going at Flat Earth. There's all kinds of people going at Tartaria. As I said at the beginning of the podcast, Robert Phoenix and his guest were talking about the nature of this reality we live in, and can we trust anything? And they were talking about, in the early 1900s, all the insane asylums, and they were speculating those asylums were created for people to be either rehabilitated or exterminated, the people who knew the old reality and didn't want to go into the new one. And they're all fascinating topics, but I think ultimately they're a waste of time. I think the only thing that's important is figuring out what you are as a being and how your being is a drop in the ocean of the Supreme Being. And that when you realize that you can look at the world through the eyes of your own and the universal Supreme Being. And feel the energy of that, which is the heartfelt energy of that, which is the most, I think, important thing, which gives you the love and the drive and the ambition and all of the things you need to live. And it's important. Very important. Well, so it doesn't matter whether we go to war. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about all this crazy shit that's going on. Your primary responsibility, and if you get bogged down in this stuff, you're going to sabotage your spiritual growth. There is such a thing. So again, I'm trying to tie together all the things I opened tonight, like the East and the West. Okay? You want to get some of that detachment that they have in the Eastern systems, and that comes from realizing what you are. But even in that realization of your pure being, you want to fulfill your role as the human being to your family and your friends and stuff like that, because they're not going to reach the same state of consciousness as you. And they're going to need comfort and support and love, and you've got to be there for them. Right? So it's all these accomplishments that you have to fulfill to be fully human and to be the Supreme Being at the same time. You have to be in this world, but you have to have a consciousness that is aware of the fact that it is not entirely existent in this world and independent of it. And that's the best place to be. And if you die, you die. Who cares? Okay? And you'd be amazed how much this fuck it attitude really helps in dark times. Believe me, it helps. Whatever's going to happen. I lived a couple decades of my life in that mindset, not knowing what was going to happen from month to month in my life, because the manner I had chosen to live was so unstable with my commitment to writing and all of these sorts of things. I was not living like a normal Canadian. And ultimately, it led me here for economic reasons, and I'm now living what I consider to be the best life I've ever lived. So follow your heart, man. Joe Campbell was right. Follow your heroic journey. And your heroic journey is always the journey to yourself. Always. All right, and this is the time we're living in now is one in which heroic journeys are going to be important. You want to make your heroic journey, because being a hero now is important. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review.